Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cyril Turner, and I am the MLA for Spruce Grove, Stony Plain, and proud to be appointed as a private sector union liaison for the Government of Alberta. I was named to this role in early May, and I'm thrilled to help the Minister review labor legislation and assist in policy development and meet with key stakeholders and those working in the energy industry. I'm thrilled to be here today alongside Minister Jason Copping, Minister of Labor and Immigration, Grant Hunter, Associate Minister of Red Tape, and Lynn Porfin, Vice President and External Relations with Merit Contractors Association. Thank you all very much for being here. We are here today to discuss Bill 32, the Restoring Balance in Alberta Workplaces Act. This is a fantastic piece of legislation, and I'm very excited to be here and involved in today's announcement. This is a significant piece of legislation that delivers on promises our government has made in our campaign platform last year, which was resoundingly accepted by Albertans by one of the largest mandates in our province's history. I will now invite Minister Copping to come speak about the specifics of this very important legislation.
Thank you, Cyril, and good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here alongside Associate Minister of Red Tape Reduction, Grant Hunter, our private sector union liaison, Cyril Turner, to announce Bill 32, an act to restore balance in Alberta's workplaces. Our government promised to restore balance in the workplace, and today we are further delivering on that promise. In the fall, our government introduced Bill 2, an act to make Alberta open for business. And the changes we are announcing today will further restore balance to Alberta's workplaces, support economic recovery, and get Albertans back to work. This past fall, we consulted with employees, employers, labor groups, and unions to find out how we can make life better for Albertans and attract investment back into our province while restoring workplace balance. We engaged with thousands of Albertans to discuss potential changes to employment standards that would reduce regulatory and red tape burdens on job creators and protect the jobs of Albertans. We received more than 5,400 survey responses, as well as written feedback on our employment standards rules. Submissions were also received through the online red tape reduction site. Now, these consultations have provided valuable insight into the perspectives of employees, job creators, and unions. Through this process, we heard that, in general, employers needed more flexibility in the Employment Standards Code to help them save time and money, which in turn protects the jobs of hardworking Albertans. The feedback also identified regulatory burdens that limit Alberta's investment potential and highlighted the need to reduce red tape for employers. We also held multiple in-person consultations and received more than 60 submissions on the Labor Relations Code. Now, these last few months have been very difficult for all Albertans, and we are facing one of the most challenging times in our history. Not only are we dealing with the initial economic devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are facing unprecedented crash in oil prices following 5 years of economic fragility in our province. Last week, the Premier announced our government's economic recovery plan, which charts a path forward for the Alberta economy. Now, this plan addresses both the short-term and long-term challenges facing our province and lays out details on how we will create jobs now that will set Alberta on the path for economic growth, diversification, and renewal for the future. Now, as the Premier said, as part of our bold plan includes doubling down on efforts to reduce regulatory burdens and barriers for businesses through the reduction of red tape. And many businesses are facing unique economic challenges that have also affected many hardworking Albertans. With so many Albertans out of work and so many businesses uncertain about their future, we need to ensure our labor laws are balanced and support businesses through economic recovery so that they can keep their doors open and Albertans can retain their jobs. Now, Bill 32 will provide employees and job creators with clearer and more transparent rules promoting fairness and productivity. For example, it includes changes that will provide more clarity about rest periods and vacation time while on job protected leave. We are balancing employee rights with the need to protect businesses and the economy while ensuring Albertans can access critical services they have come to rely on. Now, during our consultations, we heard loud and clear from job creators that simpler and more flexible rules were needed for several sections in the Employment Standards Code. This includes general holiday pay, group termination, payment of final earnings upon termination, payroll processes, and paying administrative penalties. We are listening to Albertans and taking swift actions to help employers save time and money in their daily operations. One key example of this is changes to termination pay rules. We are taking action through Bill 32 to better align termination pay with regular pay cycles. These changes to an employer's payroll processes can save Alberta's job creators an estimated $100 million per year. Now, this is based on the Canadian Payroll Association estimation that the cost to employers to generate an off-cycle check is approximately $91 per check. I want to highlight another significant change that we are making to Employment Standards Code, which entails changing temporary layoff rules from 60 days in a 120-day period to 90 days in a 120-day period. And this will ensure that Albertans can stay attached to their job longer in the event of a temporary layoff. Now, it should be noted that changes to temporary layoffs have also been proposed in Bill 24, the COVID-19 Pandemic Response Statutes Amendment Act, to deal with situations where employees are laid off due to the pandemic. Now, this economic crisis due to COVID-19 has also been especially difficult for our youth, who are already struggling to find employment here in Alberta. So as we work toward relaunching the economy, the proposed changes will help youth find work by expanding the types of jobs 13 and 14-year-olds are allowed to do without first needing a permit. These are just some of the ways flexible rules around employment standards will help the businesses recover and help Albertans return to work so they can take care of themselves and their families. Now, during the last election, our government campaigned on a platform that promised to amend the Labour Relations Code to restore balance to Alberta's labour relations laws. We are committed to increasing economic stability while reducing red tape and redundancy. We also made a commitment in our platform to protect workers from being forced to fund political activities and causes without explicit opt-in approval. And I'm happy to say today that we are keeping that promise. Some national unions have used provincial workers' dues to campaign against Albertans, their jobs, and against Alberta's core industries and interests. It is unacceptable that unions are campaigning against Alberta's key sectors that employ the workers they are supposed to represent. Through Bill 32, we are standing up for individual workers' rights. We are following through with our campaign promise to protect workers and restore democracy and balance by allowing workers the ability to choose if they want to support a political campaign with their union dues. We will not stand for unions such as Unifor campaigning against the interests of Albertans in our core sectors using money of hardworking people who they represent in those very sectors without their explicit approval. Albertans will still have the choice, of course, but we are treating employees like adults and giving them the power to decide. We are also amending the Labour Relations Code to require unions to provide members with financial statements. This change strengthens employees' rights and aligns Alberta with other provinces. It increases transparency and democracy in the workplace by making sure employees know how unions are spending their money. Bill 32 will also make changes to strikes, lockouts, and picketing. Now, our government supports workers' right to strike and picket, but we must balance the rights with the right of job creators while remaining focused on economic recovery. Now, under Bill 32, employees will need permission first to picket somewhere other than their workplace. Other proposed changes will enable the Labour Relations Board to serve employers, employees, and unions more efficiently by reducing administrative burdens, cost, and unnecessary hearings. And proposed changes to collective agreement and union certification or revocation processes will further restore balance and economic stability for the province. Now, our government is doing everything we can to get Albertans back to work. We are doing this by supporting investment, job creation, and competition in the construction sector while ensuring stability. Bill 32 will encourage competitiveness and reduce red tape with more flexible rules for industrial construction and maintenance unions to organize their members. It will also make changes to rules about major projects and add clarity and certainty, encourage further investment, and increase the number of major construction projects in the province, and allow collective agreements to stay in place for the remainder of the contract's term even after employees have chosen a new union. Our government promised a bold and comprehensive plan to chart a path forward for the Alberta economy, and Bill 32 is an important step to bring balance back to the workplace and get Albertans back to work. So we are all in this together, and we are standing up for the rights of Albertans, restoring balance, and protecting jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Copping, for the overview of Bill 32. As a 20-year member of one of the largest trade unions in the province, I've personally appreciated the effort that Minister Copping has done to reach out to countless stakeholders over many, many months, which has contributed to the important legislation today. Ensuring that our business is competitive on a global scale is of vital importance to our government. A key initiative as outlined by our campaign platform was to increase our competitive advantage by reducing red tape, which benefits job creators right across the province. As the lead minister in charge of this important work, I would now like to invite Associate Minister Hunter to say a few words about Bill 32.
Thank you, MLA Turton, for that. And it's good to be here today. I'm pleased to be here with Honourable Jason Copping, Minister of Labour and Immigration, and as I said, MLA Turton, and Lynn as well, to speak about Bill 32. A key part of my role as Associate Minister of Red Tape Reduction is to support our job creators in this province by cutting red tape and getting out of the way of our job creators. Reducing red tape saves them both time and money, which is why this is such a key part of our plan to get Albertans back to work. It allows them to focus on growing their businesses and creating jobs. This all contributes to our economic recovery. Reducing red tape for employers so they can get Albertans back to work is one important reason for many of the changes my colleague, Minister Copping, is introducing, employment standards and labor relations changes. Minister Copping has already spoken in detail about these changes. I would just like to add that many of these changes will significantly reduce administrative burden as well as reduce red tape count. In fact, many of these changes are being made in response to submissions to our Cut Red Tape website. We are still encouraging Albertans to submit their red tape reduction ideas at cutredtape.alberta.ca. Thank you to those Albertans who have let us know how we can reduce burdens on them so they can focus on job creation rather than jumping through regulatory hoops. The changes we are making today show that we are listening and responding to what Albertans are asking for. We are working hard to reduce red tape and get Albertans back to work. For example, new rules for when to pay final earnings after terminating an employee saves employers time and money on payroll processes. Allowing 13 and 14-year-olds to work more jobs without first needing a permit means employers don't have to get government approval before hiring young Albertans and giving them valuable job experience and training. And allowing employers and unions to renew a collective agreement early with employee consent reduces red tape for both employees and employers. Changes specific to the construction industry reduce red tape to make those businesses more competitive and get workers back on the job faster. Together, these changes and other changes will encourage investment in our province and make Alberta one of the freest and fastest moving economies in North America, as the Premier has said many times. It will help bring about the economic recovery this province needs. I'm proud to stand with my colleague, Minister Copping, to support these changes that free up our businesses, business owners, and entrepreneurs to do what they do best, grow our economy, and get Albertans back to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Associate Minister Hunter, for your comments and the work that you have done to get us to this point so far. And thanks again, everyone, for coming out today. And at this point, I would like to turn things over to Minister Copping's press secretary to take questions from the media. Thank you.
All right, thank you, MLA Turton. Thank you all for joining us here today. And before we open the line for questions, I just want to highlight a few housekeeping items. I want to reiterate that we are under embargo until the legislation is tabled this afternoon in the House, and we'll be taking one question at a time once we open the phone lines with one follow-up allowed. If additional time allows, we will come back to allow for additional follow-ups. If you aren't able to get in all your questions, you can feel free to send me an email. My contact information is on the media release. Just a reminder, we also have Minister Hunter, in addition to Minister Copping, MLA Turton, and Lynn Porfun from the Merit Contractors Association, available for questions as well. So, operator, can we open the phone lines? Our first question is from Graham Thompson from iPolitics. Go ahead with your first question, Graham.
Thank you. This question for Minister Copping, or anybody who wants to answer this question. The issue of balance. You started dancing around it. You mentioned Unifor. Is it a feeling that the unions had too much power under the existing system? Is that what was out of balance in your mind?
Yeah, so when we talk about balance, and this is a commitment that we made, and thank you for the question. This was a commitment that we made on our platform, is that significant changes were made under the previous government that pushed the balance towards the union side. We needed to make some changes to restore that balance. This legislation does a lot of that. We kept a number of items that the previous government kept in, but you'll notice when the legislation is tabled that we tweaked it to be able to ensure that we recognize both the union side and the employer side. But it's not just about the labor relations code. This is also about employment standards. Balance in terms of at the same time protecting workers, but also reducing red tape. So the previous government had put in a number of items which made it very difficult for employers to operate. One prime example is associated with the averaging agreements. They put in a number of rules, and we heard from employers saying that very difficult. Previous to the new averaging agreements put in, we had compressed work weeks, which is very simple that employers were able to use because not all jobs are 9 to 5. We have seasonal work. We have work in our oil sands. There needs to be some flexibility. So again, we are introducing back flexibility for employers to be able to help get Albertans back to work and quite frankly, reduce their costs. So when we're talking about balance, it's in both respects in terms of the labor code, ensuring that we provide better balance between employers and unions, but also when we're talking about employment standards, it's ensuring that we actually have balance in our labor laws that provides protection for workers while at the same time reducing costs and administrative burden for employers, because really what this is all about is getting Albertans back to work, and the lower the costs that employers have and make it easier to set up the work and have people work, that they can hire Albertans as we come out of COVID and our economy starts to recover.
All right, Graham, and if you have a follow-up, you can go ahead.
Yeah, a follow-up. You're going to have critics saying that what you're trying to do here, of course, by maybe giving workers the option of not paying union dues in certain cases, that what you're going to try to do here is undermine your critics, because very often unions are not the biggest supporters of the UCP. So this bill could be seen as a way to try and silence or undermine unions because they're critics of the government. What do you say to that?
That provision, the opt-in clause, is really about employees' rights. This was a campaign promise that was in our platform. This should come as no surprise to anyone. We heard from employees in terms of when we were developing this that there was concerns about the ability, like what unions were spending money on. They wanted to have the right to be able to make a choice. So the ability to opt in for union dues is in our platform commitment, and we're simply delivering on this today. But this issue really is about individual employee rights.
All right, thank you, Graham. Operator, could you please put through the next caller?
Next is Safe Kaiser with 660 News. Go ahead, Safe.
Good afternoon. I was wondering if we could take a look real quick at the portion of this bill that expands the types of jobs 13 and 14-year-olds can do, and take a bit of a deeper dive into that. If this bill passes, what kind of jobs can 13 and 14-year-olds do that they can't currently?
Yeah, so this is not a significant policy change. Already by director permit, we allowed 13 to 14-year-olds to do jobs, particularly in the hospitality industry, including like work, as a dishwasher, working in the kitchen. And there were some requirements in terms that it has to be under adult supervision, and it has to be, the work needs to be, occupational health and safety requirements still apply. But if an employer wanted to have a 13, 14-year-old work in those roles, they would have to apply to the director for a permit. And what we're doing is we're putting that in the regulation to make it simpler, reduce the red tape, so you don't have to have that application, and then go forward and make that happen.
All right, Sid, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, just so out of curiosity, after this bill passes, a 13, 14-year-old can't start working, let's say, in the energy sector.
No, it's the specific jobs will be laid out in regulation, and it again includes, generally speaking, light office work, light janitorial work, and in the hospitality industry primarily.
All right, thank you for that question, Sid. Operator, could you please put through the next caller?
Next is Nanla Keeler with CBC. Go ahead, Nanla.
Hello, thanks. I just wanted to follow up a little bit more on the jobs for 13 to 14-year-olds as well, because I see that, at this point they're not allowed to use deep fryers or slicers or work near moving vehicles or work in areas where smoking is permitted. Is any of that going to change in this new bill?
Yeah, what we're doing is we're taking the elements that are in the directors and directors variants that exist right now, the permits, and we're putting that into the regulation. So the primary the fundamental change is that no longer have to apply for a variance, and 13 to 14-year-olds could just work.
But if they don't have to apply for a variant, how can you guarantee their safety or make sure that they don't have to be near moving vehicles or near potentially dangerous equipment when we're talking about very, very young employees here?
So our expectation, our employment standards code is largely complaint driven, but we expect these regulations will be posted. The employers are going to be made aware of these regulations. We do inspections as well, and parents. We expect parents to be involved with their kids in terms of where are they working and what they can do. So we'll be able to manage it that way through inspections and through complaints, and we fully expect parents will be involved as well.
All right, thank you. Operator, could you please put through the next caller?
Next is Carrie Tate with the Globe and Mail. Go ahead, Carrie.
Hi, thanks. I'm wondering if you can explain what are we gaining? What's the advantage of the new picketing rule that you can only picket at your workplace unless you're granted permission otherwise?
Well, part of it is to address the issue under the prior to the previous government. There was a board decision which identifies if. Sorry, let me back up. There's a rule prior to the previous legislation that there was only picketing at your place of employment. And a board decision expanded that rule slightly, saying if there's an ally, like another employer that's supporting the employer who's on strike, then they could picket. One of the challenges is what is the definition of an ally, right? And so we are adopting a rule that's actually found in BC, whereas if you want to do allied picketing or secondary picketing at an ally, you first would have to go to the board to understand whether or not that individual is an ally. And part of that is to make sure that a union isn't picketing an employer who they believe is an ally but actually isn't, and disrupting their business. But if that employer is an ally, then they can still picket, and we're adopting the rule that's in place in BC to be able to manage that.
And does that change anything, like if a organization wanted to hold a rally at a legislature or a city hall or something like that?
No, it doesn't change that at all. This is strictly related to picketing in relation to a labor dispute.
All right, thank you for that question. Operator, could you please patch through the next caller?
Next is Janet French with CBC Edmonton. Go ahead, Janet.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my question. Can you tell us if there is in fact picketing at a location that is deemed to be unsavory, or there's also going to be penalties for blocking workers from crossing these picket lines. What kinds of sanctions or penalties could workers or unions face?
Yeah, so that's in the we're not making any changes to that. So, and the board has the ability to regulate picketing, and they will make decisions. The only change we have made, or this bill makes, is in regards to if there is an illegal strike or a lockout. We reinstated a rule that was in place prior to 2017 that if it's a legal strike, there's no requirement for the company to continue to deduct union dues. And if it's an illegal lockout, then the company is going to be on the hook for paying union dues. But in terms, but this makes no change to the current rules regarding that the board makes a decision of whether there's an illegal strike and the remedies that they have.
All right, and go ahead with your follow-up, Janet.
Yeah, I'm just curious what the rationale was for deciding that someone obstructing somebody crossing a picket line would be deemed improper. Like, what's the motivation for making that rule?
Yeah, so part of it is actually provide balance. We operate in a system where there's been numerous court decisions and a significant amount of jurisprudence in terms of what's allowable, what's not allowable in a picket line. We wanted to adopt some of the rules associated with, in other jurisdictions in terms of, if someone, there's a right to picket, and that's clear. The purpose of picketing is to provide information to people who are accessing, coming in and out of a building, and let people know what the picket is about and what the strike is about. And so that needs to happen. If people want to cross the picket line, we're making that change, saying, and they already have the information, then they need to be allowed to cross. So what it's about is about providing balance, and this is not dissimilar from other jurisdictions in terms of some of the jurisprudence that we have. So we have made that change in this particular act.
All right, thank you for those questions. We have time for one more. Operator, can you put through one last caller?
The final question is Michelle Bellefontaine with CBC. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thanks very much for taking my question. I wanted to get back to the picketing issue. First of all, how is this constitutional? Because, I know that there is, people are guaranteed a right to collective bargaining and freedom of assembly. So I'm wondering how a provision where a union essentially has to ask for permission to picket another site, how is that constitutional?
Well, our belief that it is constitutional. Previous to changes made by the previous government, well, let me back up. There is a ability to regulate picketing, which is recognized under labor legislation, and it's done all the time. In terms of this, BC has a current provision which says that you can do secondary picketing, but you have to go to the board first to ensure that is appropriate. We are using this. We believe it is constitutional. And what we're saying here is that you can picket, but you have to make sure that's within the rules first before you can go picket at a secondary site.
And
you talk about reducing red tape, but doesn't this increase red tape for the unions because they have to go now to the Labor Relations Board to essentially get permission to picket anywhere but a primary employer?
Yeah, so so we're making some changes, which are policy changes, which will increase to some regards some red tape, and so this is a policy choice, and really what we're trying to do here is make sure that is to allow picketing, secondary picketing, but of an ally. But it has to be an ally, and making sure that is an ally, so we're not disrupting a business that otherwise wouldn't be disrupted because the union may believe that it's an ally. So I understand that this may require another step by the unions before they move forward in this regard. But the reality is that if they're not allowed to picket there, then you don't throw up a picket and then you impact a business where there's no right to picket because they're not an ally of another employer.
All right, thank you, everyone. This concludes our news conference for today. If you have any additional follow-up questions, you can send me an email. My contact information is on the news release. I want to remind everyone once again that this conference is embargoed until the legislation is tabled this afternoon. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon.